the ironical thing was I had to pay for the damage to the car that hit me because it was my fault, and that was about 3,000 dirhams. But my bike cost more to fix, being the fact that they are carbon fiber and everything else. But you know what? Things like that are fixable. Things like that are replaceable. I escaped with a little bit of road rash, a decent gnarly scar, which I'm really disappointed that it's actually faded to practically nothing now. So I can't tell any make believe stories like I was attacked by a great white shark. But it's also a real leveling type of thing. And one of the things I went out and did last week was I went and inquired about getting life insurance, which I've never had before.
So one of the things I enjoy about my job is that I get to tour around the world a little bit and see some of the most beautiful countries and locations and make friends with very interesting people. One of those people is, or one of those persons is a gentleman that I've had the privilege of working with for a good few years now. And he's the only man who said to me, let's go for a walk, which turned into, I think it was 8 or 9 Ks or something stupid. And I did it gladly because he's a good man. Andy Fordham in Dubai, how are you?
It was 2.5 hours and it was 14K.
14 Ks in 2.5 hours. That's not bad. That's almost faster than my running attempt at that distance. So well played, mate. Well played. Just for some context, if you have raced an Ironman race or you've done a cycle event in Dubai or a triathlon in the Middle East, you probably bumped into Andy. Not even in the Middle East. You've worked in numerous other countries as well, in Norway, in Kazakhstan, in Russia, the time that we were in Russia together. Sadly, that doesn't happen anymore. Mostly in the area of events. You are a New Zealander, a Kiwi by birth, but you've been living in Dubai for a long time. So before we get to why you're in the Middle East, let's talk about your history, Andy. Where in New Zealand were you born? Where'd you go to school? Tell us a bit more about you and your family.
Well, I'm gonna have to correct you there. I was actually born in the UK, Gigi.
Oh gosh, all right.
I was born in Maidstone in Kent in 1965. In 1967, my parents immigrated to New Zealand with me, myself, and my 2 older brothers. But you know, true and true, I 100% refer to myself as a Kiwi. England is just my default nationality in terms of when All Blacks get knocked out of the World Cup, and if England is still there, I have to support them. But yeah, I carry 2 passports and lived in New Zealand from the age of 2 until I was 43.
Okay, so 2 until 43. That's a long time. That's 41 years of being a Kiwi, and New Zealanders are very proud of their country. What brought about the move to the Middle East of all places?
I guess the term is a little bit of itchy feet. Yeah, there was stuff going on in my life. I at the time in 2008 when I moved here, I had a 16-year-old daughter that I'd been estranged from for the best part of half of her life, and it wasn't my desire to be estranged from her. And I felt that I needed a change. I really needed a change, and it was something that occurred very, very fast. I'd been working for nearly 5 years, working in the cinema industry in New Zealand, project managing and building brand new cinemas, then operating them and getting them functional and operational, and then moving on to new projects. Came home from the pub one evening, got up the next morning, read an article in the daily newspaper about working in the Middle East, and like most people from around the world, all I really knew about Dubai was the glitz and glamour and the Palm Jumeirah and the stuff you see on National Geographic. But I read this article and I took the initiative to Google cinemas, and there were 2 cinema companies in UAE at the time that stood out. One was called CineStar, which is now called Vox Cinemas, and another one was called Grand Cinemas, which is now called Novo. And there was a contact for the director of operations on the Grand Cinemas page. I emailed him on a Sunday saying, "Hey, this is me. This is what I've done." Not actually expecting a reply, because at that stage I didn't know that Sunday was a work day in the Middle East. Went out to watch some footy that afternoon, came home, and I had a response to my email saying, "We'd like to have a Skype call with you." And within 4 days, I had 3 Skype calls, one with his father, who was the owner of the company, and I just effectively been offered a job towards the end of May 2008. And without batting an eyelid, I went into work the next day and I resigned from my job. I was meant to give 2 months notice, but I had 5 weeks leave owing, so I took that off the 2 months. In the midst of all that, I came up here for 5 days to Dubai, arrived in the middle of summer. I left Dubai, I left New Zealand, and it was like 2 degrees in the middle of winter, and I arrived into the Middle East in mid-June, and it was 44 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning. I nearly melted. But I was ready for the change. I also didn't tell very many people in New Zealand that I was going. I kept it to myself. I just started selling stuff off. And 5 weeks and 6 days from the day of reading the article in the newspaper, I pretty much sold a car, sold all my assets, packed my bags, and moved to Dubai. And that was nearly 15 years ago.
Wow. Okay. So anyone who's ever emigrated knows just how much of a struggle it was. But from a cultural point of view, New Zealander versus Emirati, was that it must have been a heck of a shock. And how easily did you integrate into life in Dubai? Or I mean, you're a pretty relaxed guy, so I can imagine for you it may have been easier, or was it not?
You know what? I think I did enough due diligence and had spoken to a couple of people that I discovered that I knew that had worked up here. I mean, the key takeaway things that I learned very early before I came up here was I needed to minimize my colorful language, which is just used in everyday talking. I don't mean in an aggressive tone, but just to not throw the French vocabulary in there in general passing. And I think the key things I learned, because I was coming up here as a divorced man, was the very strict values in terms of not being able to live with a member of the opposite sex that you were not married to or related to. I'd filed all of these things, and I knew that this is what I need to do, but I wasn't coming here as a young person who wanted to get on the lash and hit the pubs. So I was very aware, but having spent 15 years here, I'm very grateful for the culture and the level of respect that people have for one another up here. I just think the Western world has just gone to the other way. I mean, at the end of the day, as mates, we could have a bit of banter and throw in a few four-letter words, but it's, that's as far as it goes up here. It's not used in an aggressive tone. Mm-hmm. And very quickly you had to, I think, to be part of this town and to spend 15 years here, you have to accept the fact that this is a very transient place. One of the sayings I have about the Middle East is, well, actually being an expat, is the definition of the word family is very, very different. Like, my family are my closest friends. These are people that are the salt of the earth. And through some of the stories we'll tell through this interview, you'll realize how important these people are, because you don't have your mum and dad down the road. You don't have your brothers and sisters. You don't have people to go down and see. And we're all in the same boat. So there's been various times in my 15 years here where I felt like I've needed to lean on people. And likewise, people have leaned on me. But it's one of the rewarding things of being an expat. I wouldn't have changed anything I've achieved in the last 15 years. And people say, you come from one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Why are you living in the Middle East? And I have a simple answer to it. I'm happy here. I'm happy here.
And that's more pertinent than people think, right? I mean, happiness, that personal satisfaction and happiness is so important. So many people live in places where we think, they're earning a lot of money. They've got a beautiful country. They stay in a beautiful home, and yet they're desperately unhappy. But when you find your personal happiness, anywhere could be home as long as you're happy.
I think so. I mean, I think one of the things that happens when you're an expat as well is, like, there is no such thing as a wicket keeper. There's no backstop. There's no welfare system here. It's a sink or swim. And in my 15 years here, there was a period of time when I got ousted from my cinema job due to a buyout from another company of the company I work for, and I was technically unemployed for 18 months. And I found recruitment very one-dimensional. But, rather than wallow in self-pity, what did I do? I went back to my roots and started up an event management company organizing events, which is what I did when I was a lot younger. And if I actually look at that decision that I took in 2013 to do that, and where that is springboarded to, and the fact that I can hang my hat on the fact that I am the race director for the world's largest run that has ever been held. I've done it 3 years. with 1 year missing from COVID. But November, we had 193,000 people running on the busiest highway in the Middle East, and there's no bigger run in the world. Now, if I hadn't lost my job in cinemas and decided to get back into organizing events, and I believe I've organized close to 220 events in the last 10 years in the Middle East, but to be able to say I've been the event director for the world's largest run, that would not have been possible if I hadn't gone through those hardships. And it also, I can't think of any other country in the world that could do what we do here, because this is a government initiative. So basically, I don't mean this in a conceited way, but because it's a government initiative, everything you want, you get. You know, if you're going to close a 14-lane highway on a Sunday morning for 4 hours, and you give them all the argumentative points why it should be for these timings, then you get it, because Sheikh Hamdan, who is the Crown Prince, wants this place to be seen as a global hub for fitness as well as lifestyle.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of that. You were talking about sink or swim, so you moved over from New Zealand. You got into the cinema industry, and let's just go through your resume. Cinemas and eventually into events, but what's missing in between there?
Well, I mean, funny thing is, when I was at university, I bought a bike because I hated taking the bus to university, and it was 21 kilometers from my home to university, and I used to race the bus. You know, it was kind of funny, like, you know, the bus obviously was an engine, it could go faster. And that was actually what got me into triathlons. In 1986, I got into duathlons. Within 1 year of doing my first triathlon, I did an Ironman in New Zealand, the world's oldest Ironman outside of Hawaii. I did the New Zealand Ironman in 1987. To be totally honest, I was young and dumb and just basically signed up because all my mates were doing it. I didn't want to miss out and be a spectator. So that got me into that. But at the same time, I was busy organizing events as well. So long before event organization was an industry or a term, I was a pioneer, and I created series and races in New Zealand. You know, I had duathlon series, organized many triathlons. I had a small part to play in the Commonwealth Games triathlon, which was a demonstration sport, which was the prelude to triathlon getting into the Olympics in 2020 in 2000 in Sydney. Through all of that, I was involved in events. I went through a marriage. I went through a divorce. I had a foray into cinemas in New Zealand. That took me out of New Zealand into the Middle East, as you say, up to 2013. Got back into event management. For the last 10 years, I've principally been self-employed as an event freelancer. So hired by the Dubai government to organise these large-scale events, also working with Abu Dhabi government on many mainstream community events. Been a grafter here, got married here, have a 13-year-old son, did what everyone else has done as well, got divorced as well because it ran its course, but in a happy sense, very amicable. I look back on the 15 years with much happiness, and I also have a plan for the next 15 years. I'm 58 now. I see that my working life will take me through into my early 70s, and what I can achieve. You can generally work longer here. Currently working for one of the largest event companies in the Middle East that's doing big events across the whole region. Got a new plan ahead with what I want to do. I want to keep traveling to far-flung destinations and working on Ironman events, which I find my sort of, it's like my dessert. You know, it's like my dessert in life. It's not as lucrative as what I do here, but it's fun. You know, race weeks are always fun. There's always good banter. There's a couple of favorite races as well, like Kazakhstan obviously springs to mind for that, and we've been involved in that right from the get-go, you and I. It's our kind of go-to races from when we first met in Dubai. But many things in the journey have been, I guess, part of my life. And one of the things I was talking about before was how, as expats, you lean on one another.
Yes.
And I remember in 2018, my mum basically had a near-fatal heart attack. She had essentially died, and she lived in Australia. So I had to down tools and head off to Australia in the middle of summer, last week of school. Airfares were sky high. And a friend reached out to me and said, listen, I'm a pilot. I can get you friends and family fare. And instead of paying 27,000 dirhams for a family of three to go in the middle of summer down to Australia, we paid 7,000 dirhams.
Wow.
And it wasn't something that I asked for. Right. Now, interestingly enough, when I got back into cycling in 2012, a South African gentleman by the name of Richard Holland was knocked off his bike and injured very, very badly. I didn't know him. I'd only been back into cycling for 6 weeks. But there was a charity movement started by a sister called Back on Your Bike. And because at the time I was working in cinemas, I organised a movie fundraising screening for his family, where we raised close to 80,000 dirhams by screening a movie called The Impossible, which was about the tsunami in Thailand, but it was very, very appropriate. I used my cinema connections to get a free screening of this. We filled 3 cinemas, did this big fundraiser. I didn't know Richard. I did it just because I was in a position to do it. And it was interesting because if we segue to what happened to me 6 weeks ago, I was knocked off my bike riding from my home up to the Oakwood Recycle track. And the most emotional part about being knocked off my bike and being hospitalized and having plates inserted in my leg hit me about 4 or 5 days afterwards, that I was just inundated with no shortage of support of people that wanted to come around home, help me deliver meals. And then someone reminded me, he said, listen, you, for as long as I've known you, you've always gone out of your way to do things for other people. And he says, and that always comes back in a way that you don't expect it.
Yeah.
But I did have to tell people to stop bringing me food because I've lost 17 kilograms since August.
Yes, you're looking thin.
And I didn't want to put it all back on again just because I was being a couch potato with a broken leg. So
well, I think that's a great opportunity for us to talk about the bike accident. And from there, I'd like to talk about the Dubai Cycling Community Facebook page, because that's a massive deal as well. What happened? I mean, for cyclists, generally, for cyclists in Dubai, it's a pretty well set up structure, especially with the Al Qudra cycle track as well. Yeah. If you want to go and cycle in a big group or by yourself, you're pretty safe in Dubai doing that. And when I saw photographs of what had happened to you, I was like, no, what went wrong here? How did that happen?
Places here is a good word. Listen, we have fantastic cycling facilities, but what we don't have is the ability to ride from your house to these cycling facilities. And where I live, and I happen to live on the Ironman course, it's less than 1 kilometer from my house to the cycle path, and I've probably done it 300 or 400 times. And on this particular day, I rolled the dice, and a choice or a decision that I made didn't work out. And listen, it was my fault. And what I learned out of that exercise is it doesn't matter how many kilometers you have in your bank. It doesn't matter how competent you are. You don't build it. It's not like taking a vaccine and you're protected. I don't have a cycling vaccine. I could have been a brand new cyclist doing exactly the same thing and could have had the same result. As it turns out, I was hit side on by a car that entered the roundabout that I didn't think was going to, because the roundabout was full. No fault on the driver because he wasn't expecting to see me where I was coming from. And I ended up breaking the top of my tibia and having a titanium plate put in it. But it also, reminded me as well that, some of the impact of what has happened is, I pretty much got chastised by my entire family, by my girlfriend, by my ex-wife, by my son, by my friends, and telling me, what are you doing, And given the fact that I started the Dubai cycling community, and I'm a proponent for safety, and I've known indirectly or directly 12 people that have been killed by cars cycling in my 11 years back into cycling here. And then 2 weeks after my accident, a school teacher in Abu Dhabi was killed cycling on the road to school. So it was just one of those situations that cars, a 2,000 kilogram car and an 80 kilogram cyclist is no competition.
Yeah,
you're never going to win. And for me, the ironical thing was I had to pay for the damage to the car that hit me because it was my fault, and that was about 3,000 dirhams. But my bike cost more to fix, being the fact that they are carbon fiber and everything else. But you know what? Things like that are fixable. Things like that are replaceable. I escaped with a little bit of road rash, a decent gnarly scar, which I'm really disappointed that it's actually faded to practically nothing now. So I can't tell any make-believe stories like I was attacked by a great white shark. But it's also a real leveling type of thing. And one of the things I went out and did last week was I went and inquired about getting life insurance, which I've never had before. Because if anything happens to me, I'm still the main breadwinner for my son.
Yeah.
And being able to provide for him. So, if something happened to me, then that would be a massive financial strain on my ex-wife and him as well, let alone, all the things you leave behind here. So I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row and make sure that I'm doing the right, responsible thing.
Right.
And the good news is I get my bike back on Saturday, all fixed and back to sitting in its lounge for a while. I am riding already. I'm riding.
Can I offer to drive you to the track, and I'll drop you off and I'll pick you up later? You just fly me to Dubai and I'll merrily drive you to the track and back every day.
Trust me, you will not find me riding to the track. I ride my mountain bike around the community where I live because we have cycle tracks around the outside of where we live. But the bike will go in the car. There is no two bones about that. I've had my wake up call.
Andy, one of the things that I like that you said there is that you admit, okay, it was my mistake, I got it wrong. But oftentimes when we talk about cycling safety, we aim it very much at the motorists. And yes, there is a problem, particularly here in South Africa. And as a matter of fact, in my hometown, there's constant horror stories of cyclists being taken out. And motorists do have a responsibility. Again, heavy motor vehicle versus human being on a bicycle, not a fair equation. But there is also a cyclist responsibility to do things in a safe manner and obey the rules of the road. And that I often feel that doesn't get addressed. You sometimes see these nasty videos of cyclists taking umbrage to something that a driver's done and shouting and screaming and swearing. But it's a dual responsibility, isn't it?
I think it's a dual respect thing. And I tell you, one of the big things that came out of it for me was I was in hospital. I never spoke to the police at the scene because I also passed out after I'd had the accident from shock. So I was taken to hospital, and then I came out 2 days later. And then the following Sunday, I decided to head down to the police station and just say, "Hey, listen, in case you don't know, it was me that was in this accident." And I said, "But more importantly," he says, the policeman said to me, he said, do you want to lay charges? And I said, 100% no. I would actually like you to pick up the phone and call the guy that hit me and tell him I'm okay. Because, I know how I would feel if I was a driver. I would want to know. And so that was that. And then the second part was that the policeman wanted to get us both in. No charges were laid against either party, and it was my fault. But I got to meet the guy that hit me. Lovely guy. We had this wonderful conversation. And one of the takeaways from it, because he was in the car with his wife and kids, and he said, since that day that I hit you, my kids have refused to go cycling in the community. Oh. So you kind of see the psychological impact that something like this can have on other people.
Yeah.
And he really appreciated the fact that I made the policeman ring him to tell him that I'm okay, because as far as he knew, I was just bundled off in an ambulance.
And that was
he
it.
really didn't know who I was, what the status of the situation was. And to a degree, we've become friends in a way that you don't normally become friends with people. But you're right about this thing, because mutual respect is equally important about respecting the laws. I mean, if you think about cycling in a normal city, you often see cyclists crashing red lights and doing that, to keep the momentum going. And they don't do it blind, but they if they're going to use the road, they need to respect the laws the same as what cars do, and then they will gain the respect from the cars. But I mean, I still don't think, regardless if you think of Europe and you think of the cycling culture, I still think regardless, a car is always going to win, and because we live in an environment now where people have distractions, whether they're eating, doing their nails, talking on the phone, texting, or whatever else, it's just a lottery, You're not going to know who's driving behind you, So stick to the tracks, stay alive a few more years. And be thankful that I walked away with it with a small limp at the moment, and just continuing to get stronger and stronger. I mean, I've spent 6 weeks and 4 days, and I've been cycling for 3 weeks in the gym. So my recovery is going really, really well. But I think long term, getting back on the road bike and doing some longer miles will just take a little bit of confidence as well. Because they say about cyclists that there's only two sorts of cyclists: those who crashed and those who are about to.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I don't know which one I fall into now. I've done both. So
well, there we go. So you'll just keep the rubber side on the road, Andy, and avoid cars. You talk about those distractions, and also, let's face it, life is busy. People are rushing here, there, and everywhere. Fetch the kids, get to work, get the shopping done. And that does put a lot of pressure, particularly in a city like Dubai. I heard someone once said to me, Dubai has 3 million people living in the city, of which 2 million are expats. Is that true, or is
UAE as a whole has 10 million and 9 million are expats?
Wow,
only 10% of its local population. I think Dubai is actually about 5 million. I mean, we lost a few during COVID, not because of COVID, but because people left.
Yeah.
But we certainly bounced back, and at the moment we're seeing rapid rises in rent. In the last year, some people's rents have gone up 20-25%.
Wow.
This is also fueled by Russian investment in real estate, given what's been going on with Ukraine and Russia, and also coming out of COVID, where things have dropped a bit and people were leaving. So it's a minor correction, but it's kind of overcorrected now. So we're just hoping it's going to slow down. We're gifted with the best weather in the world, and we're gifted with relatively cheap fuel. But I mean, at the end of the day, rent is a very big component of what we spend. We hope it doesn't keep rising and rising.
Yeah, so I won't be moving to Dubai just yet. Let me know when it drops a little, and then I'll see you there. Andy, before we go, let's talk about the Dubai Cycling Network on Facebook. I was having a look at the page before we came on. It's a real hub for anyone who likes to be outdoors and go riding. People are selling things on there. They're sharing stories. They're giving advice. You started that, right?
Yeah, I started that. I got back into cycling in September 2012. And at the time, there were different various groups that were, one was, the Dubai Roadsters, which was kind of for fast, experienced cyclists. And then there was another one called Cycle Safe Dubai. I just kind of didn't have any umbrage with any of the other ones. I just thought I could crap my own one. So I kind of just made a page on December the 31st, 2012, called it the Dubai Cycling Community. It's only undergone one name change, and during COVID, we called it the Dubai Indoor Cycling Community. Which was kind of the surge on everybody buying indoor trainers and not being able to go outdoors, and we reverted back. But it's always been, I have a policy on the group. Anybody can join, okay? I don't have time to go through and vet whether people are cyclists or not, but every single post gets approved by me or my friend. Right. So we keep the page really, really clean. We don't get spam. It's unnecessary. We don't allow commercial posts. We just keep it informative. It's about cycling. It's a personal buy and sell page. It's asking questions, advice, all that kind of stuff. Listen, cycling in the last 12 years in Dubai has just gone crazy. We have more than 250 kilometers worth of high-speed cycle paths, which is the Al Qudra network, where you can, get out there, train up to 45 kilometers an hour, no problem. We've got another 100 kilometers worth of community-type cycle paths around communities like where I live and down by Jumeirah Beach, down by where they have the Ironman, and this is more leisurely cycling and not going down on your aero bars and time trialing. But for a city that was, when I moved here in 2008, I'm going like, how could you do this? I even created an event that I haven't held since COVID, but it's called the Crazy Bonkers Summer Solstice Ride, and it was something that I started back in 2014. And it was to see who could ride 100 miles in the middle of summer at night on the Friday closest to the summer solstice. And when we were holding the event, we were getting 500 or 600 people doing it. Wow. And out the back of the desert, we would park one of those Mr. Whippy ice cream vans. And if you whip past at about 2:30 in the morning, the cyclists would just stop and get a free ice cream.
Oh, wow.
When I got back into cycling, I could never imagine what people did. In 2014, when I was unemployed, I cycled 8,000 kilometers in 5 months over summer. And it was all at night. Wow. Because that's what we do. We're so fortunate with what the government has given us. And also, if you look at the greater infrastructure of cycling, one of the sheikhs from the Abu Dhabi royal family was the purchaser of Colnago, is the owner of the UAE cycling team, is the owner of Whoosh, the online cycling platform. They've invested so much. They're also a majority shareholding in Wolfie's Bike Shop, which is one of the best bike shops in the world. So, they haven't just invested in commercial activities. They've invested in things that are going to promote healthy lifestyles. Team Emirates, we have the women's tour here. We have the men's tour. We regularly see Team Emirates riders competing for podiums and on world stage events. So this is not just about showing off Dubai. This is serious.
Yeah, and a great way for expats to connect as well and make friends. When you've moved to a country far away from home with a very different culture, different climate, different environment. Dubai is a very cosmopolitan city, so you can feel a little bit lost and lonely in a city that is as big as Dubai. By joining the cycling community, you're meeting friends. You might meet fellow countrymen from your country, or you're going to make friends with a lot of people. Before I let you go, what is the biggest and best memory for you living in Dubai, in your time in Dubai? What stands out?
Just quickly touching on the cycling thing. I'm so glad I got back into cycling, because when all the events dried up during COVID, I started up a business from home, buying and selling secondhand bikes, which I just thought would just stop me going crazy. And then within the space of a year, I bought and sold 500 bikes. And at one stage, I had 137 bikes in my back garden. It's given me other opportunities to be entrepreneurial and find other ways to make income. But you know what? There's no single memory, Gordon. Life is only defined by the people that you meet and you spend your time with. It's not the place. It is the people in your life. And, I could be living in the back blocks of Calcutta, but if I were, no disrespect to anyone watching who's from Calcutta, but, it's about the people that are around you. And if you surround yourself around people, both nationally and internationally, that are like you, they are salt of the earth people, they're good people, then you will find happiness in life. It's not about the destination. This is a very transient place. People come and go. So I've had good friends who've been here, they've been expats, and they've left. Now, it gives you a wonderful network, because when you do want to go traveling the world, you've just about got a bed in every town. But, it's the same as you and I when we travel to events. We make friends in those cities where we go and work on events. We don't just go into a city and get paid. If it was just about going in and getting paid, there would be no attraction for me doing it. It's a lifestyle. There's an element of fun to it. And I think that the greatest memory that I take out of this place is the fact that I put my big boy pants on in 2008, and I didn't look back. I came here, and I had nothing to lose. And I've grown, I've flourished, I have built a profile, I've built a reputation. I am happier than I ever have been in a long time. In terms of personal happiness, I've got a adorable 13-and-a-half-year-old son who I'm not quite sure whether he's going to be a professional footballer or a theatrical superstar. But all of these things give you satisfaction in life. To do it, and I'll also say that so a story that I touched on right at the start and why I left here in the first place. My daughter, who I've been estranged from the best part of 22 years, I could share with you that we've been talking every day for the last month. And this is something that is been a long time coming. There's big bridges to build. There's lots of water under the bridge, but I just kind of feel like all the ducks are lining up for me at the moment, and you just take one day at a time. Brilliant. It is what life is about, man. But life is only about people. You and I became accidental friends. I call the way you meet people accidental friendships.
Yes.
We met. I remember we were sitting and we were eating at the Ironman Village, and I was just chatting to you about stuff. I didn't know who you were. You didn't know who I was. Yeah. And that was 2016, right? And we've become friends ever since. So we've been friends 7 years from that. So I think life is only defined by the people you cross paths with.
Yeah, I think with regards to you, if I'm ever taking life too seriously, the best thing I can do is send Andy a message, and within 3 text messages back, he'll remind me that life is not as serious as I thought it to be. So thank you very much for that, Andy. What a great way to end it on a positive note. Starting off, about your daughter and the fact that you guys are talking. I hope that works out well, it's an absolute pleasure. Knowing you as a mate. We do disagree on rugby quite often. We also disagree on your classification of my country's electrical system, which is no, actually, shocking. I agree with you. It's crap. I'll agree with you.
It's shocking.
It's really, I'm with you on that one, but I can't give you the satisfaction of agreeing with you. Andy Fordham, from moving to Dubai and basically creating a life yourself, working all over the Middle East, to doing some of the, not just the biggest run, but also pretty massive bike rides as well. You've been involved in the Ironman events. You've been involved in major events around Europe and certainly Asia and Middle East and what we call Eurasia. And I suppose the next time I see you will probably be in Kazakhstan. How odd is that?
That is it. Early July. I mean, to get an insight into my sense of humour, only I would invent a WhatsApp group called Two Suffers and a Kiwi.
Yeah.
So I can just wind you and that bloke Paul K up about the rugby every now and then.
Yeah. And then anytime South Africa's in the news for anything bad, I don't get my news from news. I get my news from the Two Saffers and a Kiwi website, because Andy will let me know when my country's making mistakes. Thank you for that, buddy. All right, let's wrap it up there. Andy Fordham, you legend. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, GG. Look forward to it.
Hey, thanks for watching this YouTube video, and to all those who've subscribed, thank you to you, and thank you for sharing the channel as well. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the bottom down below and click subscribe, and also click the bell for notifications. We're always striving to bring you some great content, and there's more to come.